Hi everybody, it's Professor Lynn Mandziuk and I am here with another Photoshop tutorial. Today's tutorial will be about compiling images using all of the tools that we have gone over so far to create a realistic narrative image that we constructed on our own. So let's go ahead and get started. So first we'll go into Canvas, and if you go under Files, you will see that I have all these folders here. We will click on Underwater and you will pick this first portrait here. I accidentally added duplicates, so we can just go ahead and grab all of the JPEGs that have the number 1 on it, and you'll click Download. Once those are downloaded, you'll go into your zip file, double click it to open it, and then we'll pick, again, those JPEGs. We'll right click and open them with Photoshop. So just starting off to organize our workspace, I am going to go ahead and go to Window, Arrange, and 2-up vertical. And so now what this does is I can have my canvas on one side, and I can have the other images that I'm adding to this main canvas on this right hand side. So first, the objective is to put this portrait into this background seamlessly, and to also add goggles on her face to make it look as though she is underwater and in the scene. So starting out with the portrait, I'm going to go to Select Subject here immediately. Again, I always test this. If you test this and you're like, I don't think it's going to work out the way I want, then I would suggest just figuring out which selective tool over here on the left to use. But it seems to be working pretty well. Her hair is smooth and slicked back, so I don't have to worry about any texture within the hair, which is good because it's an underwater scene. And I am going to go to select because I am already thinking that I want to feather this probably more than it is. And I am going to pick 6 pixels and click OK. And then I'm going to click the mask tool right here. You'll see that there are different options here. You can modify selection, invert the selection right here, create a mask, you can fill it, you can create a new adjustment level or layer right here. But I'm just going to mask for the time being. And to double check this, I am going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to fill it with red. And there are no white marks on the outside. It looks pretty good to me, so I'm pretty happy with this. And I am going to label this layer Portrait. And so another thing, I've mentioned it slightly as we've been working through Photoshop, is that you want to have good file hygiene. So make sure you're naming everything so your files stay organized. Sometimes you'll be working on a project and end up with many layers, like 20 layers. So you want to make sure you're labeling everything so that when you go back to work on it, you remember where everything is. I will take my layer with the mask on it labeled Portrait, and I am going to drag it and then click Shift before I drop it. That'll center the image automatically and place it on my underwater scene. I do want to shrink the image of her down a little bit in that canvas, so I will select and go to Command T, and then I can just grab the corner and it will scale the image down with constraints. And I will just keep it similar to this image. I want to think about the focal range in this. Even though it's an underwater scene, in the image, the horizon line appears to be here because we have the water on top, and then we have the sand reflecting the water on the bottom. And so a general rule of thumb with perspective is you want the image of a human, you want their eye level to be on that horizon line because that is the eye level. And for those of you in illustration, this is going to be a very important thing to remember, as well as in Photoshop. For those of you who are designers, you want to know that when you are compiling an image to make it look more realistic, you have to align with perspective to create a believable scene. And that eye line, that horizon line, is going to help you with that. So now I have that in there, and a couple things. So this is great, right? The image is on the water. It's doing mostly what I want it to do, but the lighting looks very different. So the next thing that I am going to want to do, and I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger, is I want to first of all make it look like the scene has the same light source. So first of all, I am going to create a new adjustment layer. Again, I am using non-destructive adjustment layers, and I am going to use hue saturation for this one. Click OK. And I am going to try to I actually want the image, if I turn this off, I want the image to not be quite as purple as this, but I also want it to be not as teal as this. So what I have to do is to find a medium point, and in order to have this adjustment layer only affect the portrait, I need to create a mask here, right? So I will go ahead and select this. I believe this is invert, and then I will fill with black, and you can see now only the image of the woman is affected by that. I also see that this background is a little bit too teal, so what I want to do is I want to create another adjustment layer here for hue and saturation that is only going to affect the background. And I can make this a little bit more cobalt blue as opposed to the teal. I am also going to up the saturation just because I like the look of that. And I am going to label this background hue, BG. Nope. BG hue, portrait hue. So everything is clearly labeled. Now, something else I can do to add to this piece is that, well, notice in the background, it's pretty monotone. It goes from white to dark blue essentially, whereas the actual image of the woman is going from like a peachy warm light to that blue. And so something that's going to help this image, I think, is if I add another adjustment layer, and this time I'm going to add gradient map, and I will just label it BG gradient map, and we can see now it adds that map to it. I don't want to use this, and I also want to reverse this, but what I can do is I can kind of pick, using the eyedropper tool, that's not letting me, but I can pick some maybe of these peachy warmer tones that I'm getting in her face, and then some of these more blue tones to emulate that lighting she already has. The issue is we're losing some of that refinement and definition, right? So then I can go into here, into the blend layers, and kind of go through and decide, well, do I want to use maybe something like this, maybe something like that? That's actually not the intended effect I had, but I actually like how light that is. It's kind of lightening up everything. And from there, I might even want to add, to move my adjustment layers and move that hue layer over it. And you can see it's giving another effect. Something else I can do is I can do a gradient fill layer. And let's say I don't want red. Oops. I'm going all over the place with this. Sorry, they changed the gradient editor in the last couple years and I still fumble around with it. So if I double click this, I can get a pink now. And I like that. I like how it's on an angle, but I want to only have certain areas affected by this. In particular, the light areas. So you can see here now, if I turn this on and off, it's adding to those white areas that pink effect. And if I wanted to, I could really emulate that light source. The light source is coming directly from the right on her. So I can actually make that a little bit more intense by moving this and emulating that same directional of the light source. I can actually, oops, go back in here, double click. I can even make it more intense. Maybe I do want it to be almost red on this side and creating an almost apocalyptic type feel. And then maybe I don't want white. Maybe I want this to go to like a light yellow or a warmer color, like a sunset. So you can play around with that as a tool. You can adjust this, right? If I don't want it to affect it so much, I can make it a little bit lighter. But now I'm getting a little bit more depth and detail in here. So, and you know, something is, you might want to put it over her as well, right? That's a little bit intense now. So maybe that's the mood you want and that's fine and you can do that. That's a little bit too intense for what I want. So I'm going to make sure again this says background so I know the difference. And I'm just going to duplicate this. And again, I'm going to select, so I just command select the layer mask thumbnail here, and then I'm going to click inverse, and I'm going to click that thumbnail, and I'm going to paint it by doing command delete because the black box is in the back, and that'll fill it with black. And now I can adjust this one accordingly. I can even change the layer style, right? So I can have it create a different effect with the same gradient. So it's still, you know, adding to this idea of the piece being set in the same scene, but now I can personally adjust it just on her face on its own. So I actually don't like a lot of these. I think I liked it on color burn. Sorry, my dog is falling. I told you you might hear her thump around. She's a little old girl. And she gets a little grumpy when I'm recording. So if you hear falling, if you hear a thud, that's Yuki. So I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. But now what I want is maybe I want to make her look like she's underwater. You know, on the background, we have all these water patterns from the light, but they're not on her because I took her from a different photo, right? But realistically, she would have some light pattern like that. So I am going to take this background layer and I'm going to pull it over to the plus sign to copy it, and then I'm going to bring it to the very top, and I'm going to label this light pattern. And what I can do now is I can use these blend layers again, right? And you can see that I can kind of give this effect like she is underwater. I like that color dodge, but it's a little intense, so I am going to bring it down a little bit. And again, I'm going to channel select by command selecting that thumbnail, and I'm going to create a mask on here so it's only affecting her. And I can move this under these layers we already have if I want it to have a similar effect. I kind of like the idea of it being something different. So I am going to go to layer, adjustment layer, and I can do levels this time. And again, I'm going to channel select this thumbnail of the portrait, go to levels, inverse, and command add that mask. And now I can just, oops, I can adjust the levels of that light pattern and what it's doing. And on this I can actually add another blend layer if I wanted to as well. Realistically, this pattern, I'm going to unlink it because I'm going to expand it a little bit. I'm going to deselect, so I did Command D to deselect, and I'm going to transfer this image because I want that light pattern to kind of expand, because it doesn't have to be exactly like it is in the background, right? And I kind of like this idea of having some of it on her face. So I can play around with that, and it sets her in the scene even more. Again, I can adjust it. It can just be really subtle if I want it, or I can make it really intense. But I think I just want it to be subtle. It's your world, so you can make it appear the way you want it to be. But my suggestion is to try and simulate the background photo as much as you can in this foreground element. So now something else that's happening is we can see that there's like a slight effect on the outline, and there's a slight feathering. Sorry, I'm using the magic mouse and it is going crazy. And there's like a slight feathering outline, and I don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this portrait layer, and if I double click on this, you'll notice that layer styles popped up, and I haven't talked about this yet. So let me show you what they do on a separate layer. So if I make a new layer, and let's say I just have a square, I'm going to make it red so you can really see it. So if I have this layer with a red square and I double click on here and I do bevel and emboss, I can make this look like a button or like a candy bar, right? That kind of reminds me of candy bars or a gem. You can do a stroke. I would be very hesitant to go crazy with any of these. I was going to say with the stroke, but really with any of them, because if you make them look too obvious, people are like, oh, it's a new Photoshop user, because it's what everyone does when they first learn Photoshop. We have inner shadow. So you want to make sure you're using these subtly. And really the best bet of using them subtly is just training your eye. Like, this is too much, right? So, and really we see it most with the bevel tool. I see it often, and then drop shadow. People go crazy with drop shadow. And so you can adjust these and you can see that drop shadow, but people will do like a crazy like spread like this on it. And you know, it's just not necessary to have that much drop shadow, really, is how that works. So with all of these, you know, be very gentle using them. So I'm going to delete that layer because that was just to show you, but I'm going to go back to the portrait, double click it. And now I can go to, I'm going to go to Inner Glow. And you can see it kind of emulates that white line that I already had that I want to get rid of. So you might be thinking, why is she doing this? Well, now I can pick a more appropriate color. So I could pick like this fuchsia color that I have that's already in the water. And then at least it looks like a reflective light, right? That's a little too extreme. I don't really like that. So I'm going to pick a blue. And I'm going to pick a dark blue. And that's now giving me more of the effect that I would like. But you can see I still have that outer glow. So what I can do is I can go to outer glow. And again, I can make this really dark. And I have screen on. These are blend modes just like you have on your layers. And I can do darken, and that's going to darken that up. And I can bring that opacity. I can bring that spread. And that's kind of getting rid of that outline a little bit. Sometimes drop shadow for something like this works, even though I don't really want to drop shadow. It's going to give me a little bit of effect to get rid of maybe a little bit of that outline that I have. I can go to stroke too, and I can make this like blue too. So I can play around with these things and kind of adjust the opacity on them. To make them look, oops, I'm clicking too many things, to make this look more harmonized, right? And I think that's probably going to be the best one. And I like that. I like it because it kind of almost looks like your eyes are like jittering when you look at her outline, which reminds me of being underwater. So now you can see I have a scene like this, and you know, now that I look at it, I'm like, actually maybe I do want that background a little bit more intense, right? So I can go to those blend layers again and try to find something that's maybe a little bit darker. And let's say that looks pretty good to me. Awesome. So now I want to put goggles on her face. So I'm going to go to my goggle photo over here. And I can select subject. And you can see it's getting most of the goggles, but I have this little section that's not cut out. So I'm going to have to go in and use either the polygonal lasso tool or one of these selection tools. Oops. And I'm going to click option. So the minus sign pops up because that's going to help me to cut out this shape. And on this one, I know I've been talking about non-destructive editing, but for the sake of this one, I am just going to remove the background. So I'm going to go back to my arrow tool, and I'm going to make a new layer, turn off the original, and I am going to remove. Let's see if that works. That is kind of what I wanted. So it created a mask. That's not exactly what I was looking for, but I'm going to go back. So Command Z, oops, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do Command C and copy this, and I'm going to go back to here and do Command V and paste this. So we can see that the goggles pasted. I need to pull them up here to be above her face, and I'm going to put them under the adjustment layers because I'm assuming that I want them to have the same effect as the other blend layers above it. So I am going to deselect auto select up here, and the reason for that is because every time I click, I'm going to end up hitting one of these layers and then drag and move those around, and I don't want that. So I'm going to just select this layer. I'm going to label it goggles, and I am going to move this on her face, and we can see it's a little bit small. So I'm going to do Command T, transform, scale this, and I'm going to try to size it to her face as best as I can, right? But she's slightly 3/4, not quite 3/4 view, but not straight on. The goggles are straight on, so that creates a problem, right? We want to make this look convincing, so what am I going to do? Well, what I have to do now is I have to use some of these other tools we have. So I'm going to first go into transform, and we have distort. So I can try distort, and I can pull that corner down, and you can see it's kind of distorting to her face a little bit. And sometimes you can get away with just doing this and it works. But the nose is still straight, and this is not wrapping around her head, right? So what do? I'm going to click return to select that, and then I'm going to go to filter, liquify. And this is a great tool for manipulation. So I made sure show backdrop is on, so you can either make it, 100%. I like it showing a decent amount. So what I'm going to do is now I have these different brushes, and you can see this brush, forward warp, reconstruct, smooth, swirl, pucker. So if I were to show you, like pucker, if I make the pressure and size really high, oops. The only thing about this too is you can't see what you're doing until you click OK. It'll show like a ghost of the image. And there might be a way to, I'm assuming there's probably a way to show the actual liquify that you do. But I can take this brush, and you can play around, pucker, it squeezes everything in, so it puckers, bloats, it expands. And all of these do different things, so play around with these. But I'm just going to use the forward warp for now. I think it's the density tool I want. So you can see there's like a slight ghost effect. And there we go. So you can see I'm like slowly moving this around. I need to change the size though, so I can refine it a little bit more. And again, with as I've mentioned with all these tools, you want to make sure this is really subtle. So I'm just kind of making everything veer to that right side a little bit more, as if her face was tilted more that way. If I have a bigger brush, I can go ahead, and it's a little too big. And I can move this, completely. I can actually adjust some of this too. And it looks weird because it's showing this changed layer above the original. So again, this would probably move over slightly off kilter too, just because of the way her face is tilted. And you can make a slight adjustment. Now I can click OK. And you can see there's some like curvy spots in there. So I would typically go back and refine those as much as I can. I would probably oh, I see what's happening. I was going to cut that out. I think that's actually supposed to cover and go around. And I can go back in and again just adjust some of this. I can make these a little bit sharper. I could even start painting on here and tightening everything up. I can also double click here and do a really slight, really slight drop shadow. Oops, that is not slight. There you go. I'm going to do screen is typically what it is. What? I'll just do normal for now. Just so I can see it, and I can add that there, and I can kind of use spread to soften it. I'm going to go back to darken and change opacity a little bit. And you can see I can just move it around on here. And my reasoning is that there would be some sort of shadowing or shadow effect on there. You can also do gradient overlay. So realistically, this would also have, you know, some sort of perhaps gradation effect. I'm going to go into blues, and I can actually pick, you know, colors that relate to the water. I can go to blend modes here and play around with what might be more appropriate for this scene. When I wanted that dark, you know, realistically it probably would be more subdued, but maybe around 70%. And last, realistically, these goggles also probably would have some sort of reflection on them as well, right? So what I can do now is I have these cutouts, right? So if I go to Command and select the thumbnail on goggles, it gives me the goggles. But the issue is that the eye holes are cut out, and realistically, that's where the glass would be and would have some sort of reflection. The rest of the goggles are also plastic, so they would realistically have some sort of reflection on them too. So what I can do now is I can go into Magic Wand tool, and I can do Shift with the plus, and that's not really giving me what I wanted to do, but sometimes that works. It looks like it's giving me a thin little outline there, which I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Command D, and I'm going to use the Magic Wand tool to select the outside area of the goggles. And now if I go to inverse, right here, invert selection, I have the whole solid goggles filled. And what I can do is I can take this light pattern layer again, I can make another copy of it, and I can bring it down here, and I can now delete the mask on this and then remask it with these goggles. And now I can go into blend layers, and I can use, ooh, I actually really like that one. I can use these different styles to make it look like they're sitting on her head more. Okay, so I could go in deeper, and I can, you know, even start digital painting. I could select this and make a new layer, and I could go in with the paintbrush tool, and I can use the eyedropper and grab maybe some of this color, and I could even start going in and painting. I could do a transparent layer. I'm going to make this really big just to show you quickly, and I could go in and do something like this too, because she's kind of lit from the bottom. If I wanted to, but we'll get into digital painting more in the next episode. And again, I can use these styles. That's a bit intense how I painted, but I think it might just be best to just do something like that. And I can move this and then do Command D, deselect, and you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Okay, so practice this video, Go step by step through this process with me, and it will teach you a lot about many of the tools and how to compile things that are from different images into one seamless image. Thanks, everybody. Bye.